No, I'm not going to talk about Torquay United, much as we had quite a good season, but we didn't quite make it into promotion status. So, thanks very much. I am going to talk to you about why what you do matters. I'm going to stick quite tight to the brief, hopefully, but I'm going to try and do that from the perspective of myself personally, how sometimes what I think I do matters. As an employer of 200 odd people at an agency in London, why I think they can make a difference. But also from a kind of, hopefully, a contextual and marketing communications point of view, which obviously is my business. So hopefully I'll give you a fairly rich perspective about what matters to us in our business and my agency. So, start off on a contentious point. Why what you do matters. Probably most of us are here thinking, actually, what I do doesn't really matter. I'm one person in a population of billions. It's quite hard to get my voice heard. I work in quite a large or small company, but my company, is one of many thousands. Tough times ahead. And so, how can I really make a difference? What can I do? What can my company do to make a difference? A bit more context. I'm off to China next week. Very privileged to be on a trade mission there. And it's quite pertinent, I think, to think about that question in the context of what's going on in sort of geopolitical terms. For every one of us here in the UK, there are 22 like-minded Chinese. The middle-income, middle-class population of China by 2015 will probably be something like 10 times the total population of the UK. 70% of the world's toys are made in China. Ironically, I wanted to buy some gifts to give to dignitaries in China next week. Something British, something representing the Olympics or the Jubilee. Something made in the UK. Do you know? I'm still looking. So if any of you got any tips, that would be brilliant, because most of the London 2012 memorabilia, from the mascots through to the little tie-pin things, are made in China. Slightly ironic going there and giving them a Chinese gift. But anyway, the point, hopefully, is obvious. The second contextual point is that, as Oliver Bennett talks about, there is this notion of the pessimism economy, or cultural pessimism, as he talks about. So when political, economic, social, technological change abounds at the rate that we're experiencing it, our natural default position will be one of pessimism. I can't do anything about it. I feel pretty helpless. Even with this wonderful technology in abundance and living in a fairly democratic state, we still feel this natural sort of sense of pessimism. I think that was evidenced recently in the local council elections. In Hull, a council was elected on the basis of a 25% turnout. I believe that's a record. I know that was sort of replicated across most of the UK recently. A lot of people just saying, so what? I'm not sure this is going to make any difference. The other really, really important thing, and possibly my favourite ever chart, so feel free to steal it. I know I shouldn't celebrate charts. Scott told me, don't talk about the charts. This is a great chart. And it's not mine, but it was compiled by Go Globe, you can see here. This is all the things that have happened in the last 60 seconds. 11 million, you can see for yourself hopefully, but 11 million conversations on Messenger in the last 60 seconds. 1,100 acres of farm have been farmed on Farmville. That's a lot of farming. 2 million people have watched porn online in the last 60 seconds. That's a lot of porn. The point being, obvious, that we live in this age of abundance, but so much is happening that actually the question of what we do mattering is a really tricky one. Because ultimately, it's this kind of context that leads to a sense of disenfranchisement, which was partly attributed to the London riots last year, my hometown of Ealing, of all places affected by the riots, because people essentially felt disenfranchised and unable, potentially, to make a difference. But of course, the flip side of that, and when I was in Twitter in San Francisco recently, their offices, they celebrated this as a case study of what Twitter is capable of doing. The flip side to the disenfranchisement is the mops and the buckets of Clean Up London, and the ability for us as a collective to come together and be part of something. So even as individuals, we can make a real difference. And I think that's the thing. For every glass half empty, there is a glass half full. And for me, one of the key things about why what we can do can make a difference depends on your state of mind, depends on whether your glass is half full. So, stepping back now into my world of marketing communications, our world has changed massively, massively in the last 2 years, let alone 5 years, let alone 100 years. The chart in front of you is a courtesy of Microsoft, and it basically demonstrates global media consumption, average hours, since 1900. It's brilliant, because clearly there wasn't that much media to consume in 1900. But what you can see is the proliferation of stuff that is available. The content race is well and truly, in full flow, but our mental capacity to be able to handle that content hasn't changed. So something has got to give. So as communicators, as brands, as businesses, we have to be smarter about how we can tap into this abundance of technology, this wonderful opportunity to communicate with people. So for my business, what this means is we used to be an advertising agency. We used to be what we would call a command and control center. We used to be able to talk to people about what brands should mean to them, the way that brands should be able, the way they should think about brands. That's changed massively in the last 10 years, particularly the last 5. We've moved much more to a connect and collaborate culture. This is about engagement. It's about moving from advertising to what we call managing social momentum. So managing social momentum, that's some of the work from our agency in the last 12 or 18 months. You can see some of the brands there. The point I'd make is not how wonderful that work is. You can decide that for yourself. The point I want to make is that some of the things that we're doing now are just science fiction compared to when I came into this business. It's remarkable. The ability to engage with people one-on-one in a conversation, social channels. The ability to create social gaming, where we can actually engage people in a brand story and a brand narrative beyond a piece of television communication. The ability to engage people in parties and experiences that are fully linked, socially networked into sponsorship activities. The ability to turn celebrities into very powerful properties for brands has always existed, but what we can do with them now, the way we can really magnify and amplify sponsorship and associations is gone off the scale. And that's what we know now. Clearly what's going to happen, no one knows, but the ability to engage, communicate, and enable brands and to participate with people and enable consumers to co-create and collaborate with them is untold. So, marketing context, some of our work. The next point I'd make is one of cohort. Possibly now more than at any other time, maybe since the Industrial Revolution, cohort really, really matters. So when you're born, really, really matters. Do you know, I hope you like the little candles, a little bit of artwork there on the birthday. Your frames of reference are significantly different to someone who we may be targeting for our VO5 hair care range, for example, Unilever's brand. So this is the audience participation bit. What you see before you is the patented Lidstone calendar of memorable events. And this is a list of political, social, economic high points, low points since 1960. You can look at this chart and think, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember all those things. So let's try the little experiment. Any 40-year-olds in the audience? Gentleman there, 40-year-old. I won't pick on a lady. So you were born in 1972? 71. Okay. So cohort theory basically talks about the notion that your first formative memories, your frames of reference, kick in around the age of 5 or 6. So 1971, can I ask you, sir, what's your the first thing you remember on that list would be? Possibly Star Wars?
Star Wars, I do remember Jaws as well. I remember stuff about Jaws being around.
You weren't allowed to watch Jaws at an age of 5. All right, okay, very good, very good. Star Wars. Okay, so what we can see there is essentially the frames of reference for this gentleman start from around here and fill out across the years. Now, a 16-year-old, core target audience for VO5 Unilever hair care, born in 1996. Toy Story. They won't remember that though, because actually their first memories will kick in around the age of 6. So, that takes us to 2002. Wipe out everything else that you see on this chart. They don't remember 9/11, they won't remember Live Aid, who was Princess Diana, etc., etc. The key thing here is that this impacts the way that that cohort views the world. In terms of technology, what technology enables them to do. They think technology should be much more intuitive. They think things should be free and easily accessible. And it also has a big cultural impact. So we did a big piece of global research recently, 7,000 participants in 19 markets around the world. And a massive difference between the under 24s and over 55s in terms of concern over role models. So over 55s are much more likely to think that it's really desperately sad that there aren't role models in society for people to look up to. If you're under 24, you don't really care. Actually, you make up your own models, and actually you want to be your own, which on some levels is fantastic, but on others, you could argue, quite a challenge. So, cohort. Why what you do matters depends on your birthday. The other point I'd make is from our point of view as an agency, as an employer, we get lots and lots of fantastically educated people coming in to see us asking for jobs, fantastic creative people, but they don't have what I would call a dangerous mind. When I'm looking for someone to join our agency, I'm looking for an ordinary looking person with a dangerous mind. And that means they see things differently, they see competitive situations differently, they see audiences differently, and they see the strengths of brands differently. And it's that kind of thinking, that kind of dangerous mind, that enables us as an agency to think more about this product, which is meant to be a tin of paint. I think it's frozen. There we go, there's the paint. Tin of Dulux, a project we worked on a couple of years ago. Tin of chemicals, essentially. But ultimately, the way that we were able to transform it into a marketing communications platform was to think of it as much more than a tin of chemicals. It was about thinking about it as something that could offer almost spiritual renewal, that colour can do good in the world. Any key societal change in any market around the world, colour is used to signify that change, whether it's in Iran or Russia or China or wherever. The fact is, colour has a much more positive and powerful impact than being just a tin of chemicals. And it was that kind of dangerous mind thinking that enabled us to think about Dulux differently and launch what was to become a TED award-winning campaign.
Dulux asked us, how can we become the first paint brand in people's minds when they think about colour? Our answer was the Let's Colour project, an open invitation to change grey spaces with vibrant new colours. To launch the project, we went to 4 cities in 4 different countries. In each city, we set up events where, hand in hand with the local communities, we painted streets, squares, schools, and buildings that were in need of a bit of colour. And it all started with the Let's Colour project blog. Content was uploaded in real time to the blog, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and All Cut pages. A documentary director travelled with us and created inspiring films about the relationship that people in each of those cities had with colour. The events were also shot and edited into a film. Unlike a regular TV ad, everything we see is real. Every location was transformed for real. Rather than just coming, shooting and going, the project actually left something behind. The film was premiered on the blog, driving thousands of people to our content across all the media channels. Within 2 days, it became the 12th most tweeted film. Soon, people from all around the world were asking us to be part of the project. From an architect in Italy to the governor of Bangkok, from a girl in Kosovo to a community leader in Chile. We were flooded with spontaneous requests to bring the project to all corners of the world. Dozens of new events are being prepared, and as you watch this, somewhere in the world the Let's Colour project is painting some grey place with a vibrant new colour. We created global engagement to a colour movement that is just beginning.
Okay, so the thing, again, that I'd just say about that is that it's really, we think, really powerful content. What was really good was that it helped motivate an organisation of fairly disparate employees across different organisations, across different continents. You know, sometimes activity like that is a very powerful way of helping people understand why what they do matters. So that's all well and good. That's lots of content. It's all about community, it's about engagement, social media, etc. But sometimes it's what you don't do that matters. And what I mean by that is sometimes, I think it was Groucho Marx or someone much cleverer than I am, said, don't just do something, stand there. I think in our always-on 24-hour world, we can always have a tendency to respond and act and do something. Sometimes it's much more powerful to think. I'm a planner by birth. To actually think and work our way through a problem. Again, a plagiarized chart here from Gartner called the hype cycle. Many of you will probably have seen this. What it demonstrates is that on the left-hand axis you've got excitement, on the right-hand horizontal axis you've got time. And what this demonstrates is that in the initial launch sometimes of a product or an idea, you can see a massive period of hype. The peak of inflated expectations. Everyone gets really excited about stuff. Look, the new one's out, I want it. Oh, they've just done that idea, etc., etc. Of course, sometimes if you're first to market, you're going to make some mistakes. Sometimes you're not going to quite understand how consumers are going to interact with it. You're not going to quite understand how people are going to relate to it. So, over time, what can happen is people will fall off a peak of expectation. And as time goes on, there's an opportunity for a greater level of enlightenment, and in terms of products, get a sort of better quality of product delivery, etc., etc. Across the horizontal axis, what you see is what I would call the first mover advantage to the fifth mover advantage. When I was trained, when I first came into this business, talked about first mover advantage. You've got to be first to market. You've got to do first out with your idea. I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. Actually, I think sometimes there's real merit in having fifth mover advantage. Learn by others' mistakes. Fail forwards. Understand where people have gone before and how you can actually be stronger as a result of that. Where I'm going next week is a really good example of that. A lot of Chinese brands look at what we've done and go, right, okay, I think we can do that a bit better. So I think fifth mover advantage is another good example of how what we can do matters. Along the first stages of that hype cycle is failure. And I think failure is, in a tough economic climate, is not necessarily welcomed, but actually failing forwards is really, really important. I was lucky enough to be at Facebook last year. They engender a sense of failure. They want people to fail in a kind of closed environment. They encourage it. so that they can learn and develop and be stronger and better. So failing forwards is a really good thing. In a social media context, we have to all be aware that our brands, our companies lie naked in front of the consumer. And at some point, we'll make a mistake. At some point, we'll do something wrong. It might be catastrophic, it might be small, but people will find out about it. And as businesses and brands, we have to think long and hard about that and what that means. I'll show you this via two very good examples. This is a quote from an American senator. If you don't have a seat at the table, you will be on the menu. And I apply this to social media. So, some of you will be familiar with this case study, BP and the Gulf of Mexico crisis in 2010. It was a crisis. I'm not making any statement about whether that was, that catastrophe was good or bad. Of course it wasn't good. But actually the way that BP handled the communications was totally flawed. A character called Leroy Stick, made-up character, in the absence of any formal communication from BP, decided to act on their behalf. He created this Twitter handle, BP Global PR, and he started tweeting things like this. Catastrophe is a strong word. Let's all agree to call it a whoopsie-daisy. Within weeks, months of the catastrophe, Leroy Stick had 55,000 Twitter followers. BP official Twitter handle had 7,000. About 3 months ago, that figure was 165,000, and BP official Twitter handle in the US was 30,000. I think the numbers have started to drop now because the Gulf of Mexico crisis is dying down somewhat. But the point being that not responding, not being transparent, not communicating, not being fast, not taking on the discussion created a massive PR problem for BP, and I think that's widely acknowledged, irrespective of the catastrophe. Contrast that with, if you will, last year, where Top Man had a whoopsie-daisy. They launched some T-shirts which were accused of being misogynistic. I think they probably were. No moral judgment there. But the T-shirts actually said on them, "Nice new girlfriend, what breed is she?" And I'm so sorry, but a load of fairly dismissive comments about women underneath. Now, the point being, they made a mistake. They created there was a massive hoo-ha online, and very quickly they removed the T-shirts from the stores. They enabled the discussions to take place on all their social channels. They responded to most people that actually posted comments or complained to them, and within days, the thing had subsided. It wasn't that it wasn't a problem, it was just that they handled it brilliantly. And I think this is a great example of embracing failure, recognizing that it's going to happen, and actually, moving with transparency, speed, and using the channels available to you, not hiding. So, coming towards the end, one of the big things that I have to think about a lot is what my bosses think. I work for someone, and therefore the what I do matters bit often is what they think of me. I'm not actually talking about this here. I'm a service business. I could be talking about clients. But the reality is I'm talking about the end user, the consumer, the people who view our content, the people who engage with our brands. They are the bosses, as it were. And this was brought home to us recently when we launched a new commercial for VO5. It was a part of a big social media plan. And we had designed a piece of content that we thought would try and hold people and make them sticky to the content when they saw it online on YouTube. And what we know is that people drop out of ads on YouTube fairly quickly, so it's relative to the length of the film. But if you've got a 1:30 film, then they'll probably drop out after possibly 25, 30 seconds. So within the first 20 seconds, it's usually pretty fundamental to do something that's going to make them think, that's quite good, or that's quite funny, particularly when you haven't got naked women or kittens in your advertising. I'm going to show you the first 20 seconds. I'm not going to play you the whole thing. Look out for a butter churning scene, about 20 seconds in. So, that was butter churning for those of you who might be confused that it was something else. What happened online was quite interesting because our plan almost came into effect with some of the comments on the right-hand side. Am I the only one who finds @20 hilarious? And What we have available to us now is the ability to monitor how people interact with content. You can't always predict it, but you can start to plan on that basis. And what was great about this piece of content is that, as you can see from the next chart, the YouTube engagement chart, actually we started with a below average level of engagement in the first 10, 15 seconds of the ad, because we haven't got any kittens or naked women in it. But actually, at the butter churning scene, the red line, what happens is people stay with us, much more likely to stay with us compared to the average YouTube. And this is average YouTube films, it's not advertising. So this propelled it into, ironically, the top 4 comedy films on YouTube Comedy Channel, and is now cited by YouTube as a creative case study for something to go viral. And for us, it was a great learning about understanding the boss. Our brands lie naked in front of the consumer. I'm not going to go into a big piece about corporate social responsibility today, isn't about that, I don't think. But it is clear that as a representative of an organisation, people look to our company now. They believe that we bear as much responsibility for creating social change as governments. 80% of consumers in the UK think that business bears as much responsibility for creating social change as governments. So, it's easy for us to sponsor something, be involved with a charity, etc., etc. My bosses decided that they didn't want to do that. They wanted to create something. They wanted to walk the walk. And just briefly, what they did was create our very own youth Davos, something called One Young World. If you're interested, you can look at oneyoungworld.com. But essentially, it is an annual event where the brightest 1,000-odd minds from around the world, over 100 countries, come together to talk about a number of different motions in the way that the UN would, and then take those motions into plenary sessions, and then take that content to leaders around the world to try and push for political, social, economic changes. It's absolutely networked by social media. So it's a modern version of Davos, if you will. But for us, you know, it's a big time investment. There's quite a significant financial investment. We're doing it because actually when a client looks at us and says, so what are you doing about trying to put some good back in? We've got our own case study, not a sponsorship or an association. And that makes a big difference to the people who work for me, because we're walking the walk. The clincher, burnt cheese. It was alluded to earlier. This is, again, a story from Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, when he came back to Starbucks in 2008 to rescue the ailing company. He talked about a number of things. One, how the stores weren't well trained enough, the products had gone downhill, and actually they'd over-innovated. They'd got into innoflation, if you call it. One of the examples of that was the breakfast cheese sandwich. The breakfast cheese sandwich had become part of a 3% revenue sandwich profile for their business. It represented billions of dollars to that company. When Howard Schultz came in, he got rid of the breakfast cheese sandwich. So my adage from here on in is, what's your cheese sandwich? The reason why he got rid of his cheese sandwich was because they'd lost sense of their purpose. At Starbucks, they were a coffee company. They provided a fantastic aroma, coffee experience, muffins, etc. If you walked into a Starbucks, one of the 3,000 Starbucks in the US 8 years ago, what you would have found in the morning was an overpowering smell of burnt cheese. And what they'd lost sight of was what Starbucks actually stood for, represented. And for me, this is a great example of what brands and individuals within businesses have to remember. This notion of humility, the notion of a confident assessment of your own worth. It's not a sign of weakness. It's about recognizing what you stand for, what you're about as an individual and as a company. But actually, if you make a mistake, being honest and transparent about it. It's a fantastic trait, and a lot of the companies that you would admire and respect would demonstrate that trait of humility, a confident assessment of one's own worth. And that's something that I try to ensure that we exude as a company. So, to conclude, if you take one thing away from my spiel today, it's this. I'm stood here like some kind of expert, and I'm not. Actually, I think expertise is a bad thing. And I believe that not being an expert really, really matters. So if you want to know how to make a difference, it's don't be an expert. The world I've just talked about is in constant flux and change. No one in this room can be an expert. And so I will leave you with the adage of my favourite architect, if I have one, Frank Lloyd Wright, who designed the Guggenheim. An expert is someone who has stopped thinking. And my request to everyone in this room, and I think that this audience probably demonstrate it in massive abundance, but never ever stop thinking, and never ever become an expert, because that's when you stop. Thank you very much.
Russ, just before we let you go, never ever stop thinking. Great place to finish on. During your presentation there, I actually was thinking, as a communicator, a thought struck me. We live in a global, bite-sized, app-driven, eye-candy culture nowadays, where all our content, you talked about the content race, where all our content and all our media is produced and consumed at such a high velocity that it's very difficult for the user, the consumer, and indeed the producer, the publisher, or the brand advisor to craft something that can be understood if it's a complex message. What kind of insight or thoughts or advice do you have, perhaps for our audience here and online? What kind of advice can you offer us in how, as a brand communicator, we can produce messages and communications on complex issues that can be well understood by your target audiences?
Okay. So, I mean, I think in amongst this flux and this change, one of the really big things that still holds very, very true is great thinking and great strategy. So any idea worth its salt that will cut through will be competitive. It'll be very different to what your competitors are doing, or your category is doing. It will be relevant, so it will tap into some kind of insight about your audience, the people you want to communicate with, and it will be true. You know, we can create fantastic communications as agencies about brands that could be completely flawed because they're not actually rooted or grounded in the product or service delivery. And it's that marriage of those three key things that's really, really fundamental. And then the easy to say but much harder to do is the gold dust, you know, the magic dust, which is, you know, I think it was Arthur Koestler who said that, you know, creativity is the defeat of habit through originality. And I think ultimately, you know, great ideas defeat habits, and that's why creative people are, you know, to be lauded, because someone like Ives, Sir Ives, you know, he defeats habit. You know, he challenges what you know, but taps into something that he thinks will be relevant to you. And I think that's the thing about any great idea.
Fantastic. Well, Russ, that's a really great insight. You know, great ideas produces great business.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very
Russ
much.
Lidstone.